Hi everyone, this video is part 2 of the development unit. It will cover cognitive and social development theories and some people to keep in mind while we're watching this to make sure you know their importance and influence is Jean Piaget is the first one, the second is Lev Vygotsky, and the third is Albert Bandura. So let's start with Jean Piaget. So Jean Piaget is very important to developmental psychology. What he did was he studied how children and their cognitive abilities change as they grow. And this was really different for his time period. People prior to Piaget felt that children were just many adults, that they thought in similar ways and they problem solved in similar ways as adults did, but they were just a smaller version of adults. But Piaget really changed our understanding of the way children think, and he studied how children develop their problem solving abilities, and he realized that they actually go through milestones where they change the way they think and problem solve over time. His theories had a tremendous impact on the field of developmental psychology. It is now a subfield of psychology where many people just focus on development, either childhood or even over a lifespan. And this also really influenced education and how we teach children, knowing that children in different stages think about questions, problem solving, and have different abilities to grasp concepts than they do as they grow older. And so that's something that has helped education as well, his theories have. So to start with, let's just start with how Jean Piaget explains how children learn about the world. So he would say that children learn about the world through schemas. So you start with a concept or a framework of information. So you start with something you're exposed to, and that becomes your schema or your first category. So you can see this child in the diagram. The child has a dog here, a pet, and this is the child's probably first schema for animals. This is probably the first animal that this child has been exposed to, and that's their pet in their home. And so the parents in the household are probably calling this animal a dog, and so this child has developed a schema or a category for dogs based on the qualities. It's fluffy, it's got 4 legs, it barks, this is a dog. And so when the child is exposed to something new, this is how the child learns. They're exposed to something new that's similar. So you can see in this second frame, the child sees something similar, and it's this first exposure to something similar. It's soft, just like dog. It's got a tail, just like dog, and it has 4 legs, and it's in the house. And so the child will assimilate this new information into its existing schema. Now, the child will learn and get new information when the parent helps the child accommodate. So the parent will say, "No, that's not a doggy. This is a cat. Cats meow. Cats are a little sleepier. Cats I don't know what else about a cat. Cats like mice." And so the adult will allow that child to develop a new schema for cat. So this is not dog, this is cat. And so now they have a new category for what cats are. And so that is accommodation. When you are adapting your current schema, you're incorporating new information, you're developing a new schema, and now you have dog and you have cat, and now you have 2 schemas. And so that's how Piaget would say children learn new information about their world. Next is Piaget's stages of development, and Piaget says that there are milestones that children meet, and there are these pretty clear changes over time in the way that children can think about the world and can problem solve. And it happens pretty consistently. And so we can see across the board at about age 2, children are able to think differently about things. And then moving 6, 7, they start to think a little bit differently. And so he marked these by different stages, and he named each stage. We'll start with the first stage, which is the sensory motor stage. And the sensory motor stage is the first stage in Piaget's cognitive development theories. This starts at birth and lasts through about 2 years of age. And at this point, children are really focused on their senses, touch, and experiencing the world with their senses, smelling and tasting, and just consuming the world through their senses, but also developing their motor abilities. Now, one thing that Piaget says is during this stage, there is a cognitive milestone that children will meet, and it is called object permanence. Now, for the first part of the sensory motor stage, children will not be able to have object permanence, but they will meet this milestone during the sensory motor stage. And object permanence is a milestone in which a child is able to understand that an object can exist even when it cannot be seen. So, for example, peekaboo is very fun to play with children who do not have object permanence, because what has happened is they still do not understand that something can exist when you can't see it. So you could take a toy and put a blanket over the toy, and then all of a sudden it's gone. And the child is just, oh, well, it's gone, and they'll move on to something else. Or you could play peekaboo. You could put your hands over your face and then show yourself peekaboo, and it's so exciting for the child because at one moment you're gone and then you are there again and you've reappeared. And there is a point though where they will acquire the understanding that an object can remain even when it's not seen, and that is object permanence. The next stage is pre-operational, and I think the pre-operational stage is easy to remember because pre-operational development stage happens during the preschool years. So pre-operational is in the preschool years. It's prior to elementary school. It's ages 2 to about 6, and this is the time frame when children are beginning to have some mental operations, but they can do rule following. They can play simple games. They really like pretend play and imaginative play, but they are not going to be able to do like logical types of games. Children in this stage are going to be egocentric, which means they're going to struggle to see something from someone else's point of view. So this is a demonstration here where you could have a child in the pre-operational stage looking at a scene, someone else looking from a different point of view, and you can ask this child, what does the doll see? And so they're going to have a really hard time. If they're egocentric, they're going to really struggle to explain it from someone else's point of view, what they can see. Now, about the end of the pre-operational stage, when they're about 4 or 5, they're going to develop theory of mind. And that's where they can think about what someone else feels or what someone else could be thinking. So at the beginning of the pre-operational stage, if you are trying to reason with a child and you try to help them understand how their actions hurt someone else's feelings, it's going to be really hard when they're like 2 or 3. They just don't, it's hard for them to think about what someone else is thinking or feeling. But when they're getting towards the end of this stage, 4, 5, 6, they are going to have the ability to think about how someone else feels and how someone else is thinking and what they're thinking about. And so you can really talk to them about how their actions impact someone else and how it hurts that other person's feelings. So that's theory of mind. They will not understand conservation. Conservation is something that students typically are not as familiar with. So conservation is this idea that in your mind, you can understand that something can change its shape, or maybe it can change its visual appearance in some way. Maybe the something about its visual properties has changed, and yet it is maintained the same thing. It's still the same object. It's still the same. Children in this stage, the pre-operational stage, cannot understand that. And I'll show you an example of what this would be like. Here are some examples of situations you can set up to talk to a child in the pre-operational stage. I know this is really small, but I'll talk you through it. So you could have 2 glasses with liquid and the same amount of liquid. You could take one of these glasses and pour it into a tall, skinny glass, and what will visually happen is, because it's tall and skinny, when you're pouring it in, it will appear that the water level has risen, which it has, but the water hasn't changed, right? You've just poured this glass into this glass. And then you would ask the child which glass has more water, and in the pre-operational stage, they'll say, well, the taller one. And they could even reason with you and be like, well, because look, it's taller, it has more water. But a child in the concrete operational stage who is older than 6 or 7 will definitely understand. They'll get it. Oh, it's the same. You just poured it into another other size glass, but it's the same water. You can do this with other things. If you see down here, you have some clay or Play-Doh, you have two balls and you ball them up about the same size. You smash one and you know, which clay or which object has more clay, and they'll be like, oh, well, this one, because look how long it is, even though it's the same, it's just changed its shape. You can do this with cookies or crackers. If you give a child, maybe you give all these kids, you give them all the same, you give them each one cookie, all the same, but one of the children, you take that one cookie and you break it in half. Children in the pre-operational stage will then immediately be upset. Oh, they have two cookies, and feel like that child has more because you see the two separate pieces, even though they actually have the same amount, but now it's two cookies, so there's more. So that a child in this pre-operational stage is going to really struggle with conservation, and conservation is just that idea that something can change visually but still maintain the same. It has those same properties. It's still the same thing, even though some qualities of it have changed. It's still the same. A child who is in the concrete operational stage is going to understand that. They will understand this principle of conservation. They will understand that even though there has been some kind of visual change, it's maintained that same mass or volume or number or whatever that is. They will understand that it's still the same, and they won't be fooled by that. A child in the concrete operational stage, it starts about elementary school, so about 6 or 7, and then lasts until about 11 years old. A child in this stage, they're going to be able to do simple math problems. They are going to be able to think logically. They're going to enjoy analogies, perform mathematical operations. This is where kids are learning some of those basic math just operations like addition and subtraction, and they're learning some of those things in school. Now, when kids get into about middle school, they're going to start doing math operations that are more abstract. So as we move into the formal operational stage, which starts about 12 and then lasts on through adulthood, this is that time period of adolescence where someone in this stage is going to be able to think abstractly or hypothetically. They're going to have this potential for moral reasoning, and this is what Piaget would say is the final developmental stage as far as cognitive development goes. And so if we're looking at that as a whole, you can see there are stages of growth, and so you can see this is displayed in a stair step. And so Piaget would say our cognitive abilities are shaped by these milestones where we can better understand different type of cognitive operations. So next we have Lev Vygotsky, and Lev Vygotsky influenced education. Lev Vygotsky's idea of the zone of proximal development helps us understand how we can get children to grow cognitively and to learn and get them to move forward in their cognitive development. And so I really like this visual because I think this visual really helps you understand the zone of proximal development. So here we have in the center, this is something a child could do on their own. So maybe on their own, a child can maybe they can draw on their own, but they would really struggle. Maybe out here, maybe this child would really struggle with completing a maze. So this child can draw, they have that ability, but they would not be able to process doing a maze on their own. So the zone of proximal development, this is the place of perfect learning. So Lev Vygotsky says the zone of proximal development is just between what the child can do on their own and what they cannot do on their own. It's this place where with a little bit of help or some tools that they can do something outside of what they could do on their own. And you're getting them to get over this hump of being of what I can do and what I can't do. And so this would be maybe an adult giving them hints or giving them clues. Try this, try that. Without the adult, the child could not do that task on their own. But with the adult giving what he would call scaffolds, and scaffolds are these just supports that help them do something that they wouldn't be able to do on their own, the child is able to do a very difficult task that they would not be able to do on their own. Finally, we have Albert Bandura, and Albert Bandura helps us understand that children are attentive to adult behaviors. They watch consequences. They use adults as models. They imitate adult behaviors. And this is something we learned back in the learning unit with the Bobo doll study, which would be something to look up if you do not remember. But his idea is that we learn through imitation and watching. Guys, I hope this was helpful. This was Cognitive and